On a chilly winter evening in Evansville, Indiana, a dedicated firefighter, also a loving husband and father, returned home after another exhausting shift. As the 51-year-old made his way up the driveway toward his front door, a sudden burst of gunfire hit him from behind. Within moments, his wife raced outside, dialing 911 in a panic. She had been just inside the house, standing by the kitchen window while preparing dinner, a window that was only a few feet from the driveway. Yet, she insisted she hadn't seen anything. Speaking to detectives at the scene, she said, "I didn't mean for any of this to happen." Evansville, the third largest city in Indiana, rests peacefully along a scenic curve of the Ohio River. In its wide residential areas, life moves at a gentler pace, and neighbors often look out for one another. That evening on Oakley Street, the sun was beginning to dip below the horizon. Inside her home, Elizabeth Doer, who went by Becky, was in the kitchen cooking pork chops. Her husband, Robert, known to many as Robbie, was expected home around 7 p.m. Robbie was known for his strong work ethic, often pulling 24-hour shifts at the firehouse. He had been serving his community since the fall of 1991, and by the winter of 2019, he was nearing 30 years in the profession. That day, Robbie had taken on a partial shift to help out a coworker. A little after 7 p.m., Becky stood by the kitchen window, listening for the familiar crunch of tires over the gravel. She expected to see Robbie stepping out of his vehicle, carrying his lunchbox, thermos, and other gear. She did hear the truck roll in. But what followed was shocking, a series of popping sounds. Gunshots. Becky said it was gunfire.
911.
I need an ambulance.
What's the address?
I need no please.
What's going on there?
My husband just got shot.
You said your husband just got shot?
Yes.
Stay on the line. I'll connect you to the ambulance service, okay?
I got him on the phone. Rob. I don't know. I just heard a bunch of popping. Please get somebody here. Rob. Oh my God.
It's been said. Ma'am, I need you to listen to me, okay, ma'am? It's been said. Tell me what happened.
I don't know. I saw his truck pull in. I saw his headlights.
Okay, what kind of vehicle was it?
Ma'am, all I saw was my husband's headlights pull into the driveway, and then I heard a bunch of popping.
Where was he shot at?
Ma'am, I don't know. It's dark. All I see is blood on the ground.
Where is your husband?
He's on our front walk. He's alive, please.
Okay,
I'm
ma'am,
sorry,
how
what?
old is your husband?
My husband's 61 years old. His name is... Oh, my God. Please hurry.
Okay,
His
is he
name is
breathing?
Robert Doer. Yes, every once in a while.
When did this happen, ma'am?
Just a few minutes ago.
Okay.
I heard popping, and I went to the front door, and I didn't see anything, so I went to the side door and came out, and I saw my husband just laying there. Please.
Okay,
Hurry.
is the assailant still there?
No, I didn't see anybody.
See anyone? Okay.
The police are here.
Okay, I'm letting
No,
you know
I
now,
don't.
okay?
Okay. All right, thank you.
Welcome.
When police and firefighters arrived on the scene, they found Robbie lying in the driveway, barely clinging to life after suffering multiple gunshot wounds. In that moment, they realized they weren't just trying to save a victim. They were trying to save one of their own, someone many of them considered a brother. Despite every effort made by first responders, there was nothing more they could do. Robert Doer took his final breath right there in front of his home, before his fellow firefighters could even load him into an ambulance. Robbie Doer, 51 years old, had followed in his father's footsteps by becoming a firefighter, a job that was more than just work to him. It was his calling. His teammates weren't just colleagues, they were like family. But while the job brought meaning and purpose, it didn't always cover the cost of living. For 15 years, Robbie held a second job at Taco John's, and more recently, he had been donating plasma to help support his household. After marrying Becky the previous year, she had stopped working, which likely added more financial strain on Robbie's shoulders. He also had a daughter, Lindsay Griffin, who had moved out years earlier and had 2 young children of her own, Robbie's beloved grandkids. Lindsay was devastated by her father's death. The news of his murder came as a complete shock. Robbie was well known for being a generous, hardworking man, someone who always put others first. The idea that he could be deliberately targeted, ambushed, and killed just steps from his front door was not only tragic but deeply confusing to those who knew him. The community was left mourning the loss of an Evansville firefighter, a man who had dedicated nearly 30 years to serving and protecting others, gunned down in cold blood outside his own home.
To see an Evansville firefighter gunned down in front of his own home is something that we weren't really prepared for. The firefighters that had to respond to that scene and work on their brother, the police officers that arrived and quickly realized that it was a firefighter, is just something that we don't see very often.
Neighbors living near the Doer residence reported no strange sounds or unusual activity before or after the gunshots. No one spotted a person or vehicle fleeing the scene. Becky, who was home alone at the time, also claimed she hadn't seen a thing. At the crime scene, detectives couldn't find any spent shell casings, suggesting that the shooter may have used a revolver, since revolvers typically retain casings after firing. Whoever pulled the trigger had vanished quickly and left little evidence behind. Robbie had been shot from behind, with bullets hitting both his shoulder and his head. Multiple rounds were discharged, and some of them even entered neighboring houses, though luckily no one else was hurt. What stood out during the autopsy was the unusual combination of ammunition used. The buckshot was from a small-gauge shotgun, while the other rounds were .45 caliber pistol bullets. This mix of ammo led investigators to a specific firearm, the Taurus Judge. This revolver is capable of firing both shotgun shells and .45 caliber bullets. With that in mind, law enforcement focused their attention on this particular model. When FBI task force officers assisting the Evansville police began checking their databases, they made a promising discovery. A Taurus Judge revolver had been reported stolen around 6 months earlier from River City Pawn Shop, just 5 miles from Oakley Street and less than a 15-minute drive from Robbie Doer's home. It seemed likely that this stolen weapon was the one used in the killing. But finding out who pulled the trigger remained the biggest mystery. The very next day after Robbie's murder, Becky Doer showed up at the fire station. She wanted to ask about her late husband's pension benefits. As his surviving spouse, she would be entitled to 75% of his pension for life, in addition to a $112,000 death benefit. Robbie's co-workers, many of whom were still grappling with the shock and pain of his death, were stunned by how quickly Becky inquired about the money, less than 12 hours after Robbie had died. On Monday evening, March 4th, about a week after the murder and immediately following Robbie's funeral, Becky was asked to go with Evansville police and FBI agents for more questioning. On the night of the shooting, she had confidently told detectives about her actions that day, including who she had spoken to and when. To confirm her statements, investigators obtained data from her phone and toll records from her carrier, Sprint. As they compared Becky's claims to Sprint's records, they noticed something odd. An incoming call from an Evansville area number had reached her phone shortly before the murder. The call lasted just over 4 minutes. But it didn't appear in her phone's call log, and she had never mentioned it to the police. The only possible conclusion was that Becky had deleted the call after it ended. At 6:51 p.m., Robbie was gunned down less than 10 minutes later. Investigators asked Becky to review a list of phone numbers from her call log and identify who each one belonged to. She was detailed and precise in her answers, recalling small specifics from the day, like the pork chops she was cooking, her path through the house, and even the dog's behavior. But strangely, she couldn't remember anything about the 4-minute phone call she had shortly before her husband was murdered.
Whether you, I, or the other people that are in these rooms over here can change what happened. But you can, let me finish, cannot change what happened. But you can change it from how it goes on here now by telling the truth. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do.
Okay, so take a deep breath and tell us who you talked to 5 minutes before your husband was killed in your driveway, getting out of his truck in the back of the head. We're asking you questions we know the answers to, Becky.
The investigators weren't making empty threats. They had solid leads. When they traced the mysterious phone number, it led them to someone Becky knew personally, Larry Richmond Sr. Larry, 46 years old, was engaged to Becky's sister, Amanda. But his background was alarming. He wasn't just a family acquaintance. He was also a convicted killer. Back in 1996, Larry had been sentenced to 45 years in prison for fatally shooting 70-year-old James Everett Montgomery. What made things even more concerning was the timing. Larry had only been out of prison for less than a year.
This is your fiance. The one you don't know much about, correct? And I don't know much about him. Then what did you talk to him about? Well, he wanted to know if what Rob and I were doing this coming this weekend. So what did you talk to him about? And do not lie, because we're telling you, answering your question, we already know the answer to. We know his history, we know everything about him. I don't know what I don't know what, I mean, I know what happened to Rob in my driveway, but I don't know who did it. I don't know. I honestly don't know who did it. Nothing about him calling until we pull it out of you. The longer you keep it up, the worse it looks on you. And I didn't even tell anybody to hurt my husband. Tell us what happened. Tell us what happened. I have only met him a few times. But you had a 5-minute conversation with him. He basically asked what we were up to. Does Rob work this weekend?
Becky had claimed that she didn't know Larry well enough to have a real opinion about him. But just like other parts of her story, that didn't seem to line up with reality. Photos surfaced showing Becky and Larry together on multiple occasions, including family gatherings. They had even gone on a double date, indicating a much closer connection than she had admitted. Then came the phone records. The call made shortly before the murder wasn't the only one missing from Becky's phone. It turned out she frequently erased calls from her call log. Investigators discovered 28 additional calls that were documented by the provider but had been deleted from her device. 15 of those, within the 2 months leading up to Robbie's death, were with Larry Richmond, her sister's fiancé. There were no texts or other forms of communication found between the two, and investigators couldn't determine the exact content of the calls. Still, Becky maintained that she had no involvement in her husband's murder. However, the question remained, if she had nothing to hide, why delete the calls? Becky later admitted she had removed them because she thought the call history would look suspicious. She said it might give the impression that she and Larry were having an affair.
Talk that off for 40 minutes. Well, this young man asked you how many times? Any more phone calls, any more phone calls, any more phone calls. And every time you start to get nervous. Right? Because you knew we were coming to that phone call, that's your right.
I didn't want you to think that I was having an affair with him because I have not had an affair.
That phone call before the murder may not have been definitive proof of an affair, but detectives did have reason to suspect Becky hadn't been faithful to her husband. During a search of the couple's home on Oakley Street, investigators uncovered a letter written by Robbie and tucked away in a drawer in the master bedroom. In the handwritten note, Robbie referenced Becky's unfaithfulness with lines like, "Ever since he came back into your life," and "I see his text messages on your phone." While the identity of the man Robbie was referring to remained unclear, the letter cast doubt on Becky's honesty. Becky was eventually arrested and charged with obstruction of justice, both for deleting the crucial phone call from her log the night Robbie was killed and for lying to investigators about it. She was released on bail, and though those specific charges were later dropped, authorities had their sights set on far more serious allegations. Building a solid case, however, would take time. After Becky's release, Evansville police began surveillance on her, Larry Richmond Sr., and also his son, Larry Richmond Jr. Investigators learned that Larry Jr. had been working at the River City pawn shop during the time the Taurus Judge revolver had gone missing from its inventory, the same weapon believed to have been used in Robbie's murder. Since the firearm still hadn't been recovered, authorities brought Larry Jr. in for questioning. Facing the pressure of more severe charges, Larry Jr. quickly confessed. He admitted to stealing the Taurus Judge from the shop. Larry Jr. also turned over his phone to investigators. Inside was a text conversation between him and his father. He had sent a photo of the silver revolver to Larry Sr., offering it in trade. According to Larry Jr., he gave the gun to his father just 2 days before Robbie Doerr was killed. In August 2020, Larry Richmond Sr. pleaded guilty to 2 counts of being a felon in possession of a firearm. along with 2 additional counts for having firearms with obliterated serial numbers. After being released on parole for his earlier conviction, he found himself heading back to prison for new felony offenses committed just months after his release. While the suspected shooter was now behind bars, detectives continued to build their case against the second individual they believed had a hand in Robbie's murder, his wife, Elizabeth Dewar. As part of their investigation, Evansville police summoned Becky to testify before a Vanderburgh County grand jury. Though those proceedings remained sealed from the public, what followed was telling. The day after her testimony in July 2022, Becky was arrested and taken into custody. Officials claimed she had lied under oath. Like the man suspected of pulling the trigger, Becky was also now facing serious charges. She remained behind bars as the state filed counts of conspiracy and murder against her.
His death rocked this community as he had just finished his shift serving the citizens of Evansville as a firefighter. Truly one of Evansville's bravest. Today is the first step in seeing some type of justice for Robbie. A short while ago, Larry Richmond Sr. and Elizabeth Fox Dorr were charged with the murder of Robbie. For over 3 years, EPD investigators, along with the FBI, the Vanderburgh County Prosecutor's Office, and the Vanderburgh County Cyber Crimes Task Force have been working tirelessly to get to where we are today.
We are relieved that the long wait is over and the individuals involved in this murder are being brought to justice for not only Robbie's murder, but the pain they have caused his family, his friends, and our department. Thank you.
Becky Doer entered a plea of not guilty and began preparing for her day in court. Her trial began in the spring of 2024, while the case against Larry Richmond Sr. was separated from hers and remained unresolved at the time. The evidence presented against Becky was largely circumstantial, with gaps that left room for doubt. Still, prosecutors maintained that she had clear reasons to want Robbie dead. They pointed to a financial motive, highlighting the benefits she stood to receive as his widow. Additionally, they argued that Becky had been romantically involved with Larry Sr., her sister Amanda's fiancé. The prosecution suggested that her desire to be with Larry was yet another reason she would have wanted her husband out of the picture.
Robbie Dorr was gunned down in his own driveway by Larry Richmond Sr. I didn't intend for any of this to happen. This is what the defendant told detectives who were questioning her that night about the death of her husband. When Robbie Dorr arrived at his home after work, he was ambushed by Larry Richmond, who lied in wait just feet from where Robbie Dorr pulled into his driveway. This puts him close to a window the defendant says she was standing near making a pork chop dinner. Just 15 minutes before Robbie Dorr was ambushed and killed, the defendant spoke with Larry Richmond Sr. on the phone for 4 minutes and 18 seconds. As soon as the defendant was finished talking to Larry Richmond Sr., she deleted that phone call.
There will be no evidence that Becky Dorr had any conversation with anyone about killing anyone. That doesn't exist. That is a speculative, suppositional, grandiose suggestion to support a charge that should have never been filed. You will hear no evidence of Becky Dorr talking about getting a gun. You'll hear no evidence about a conversation with anyone that's plotting her husband's death. That evidence does not exist.
One of Becky's adult sons, Nathaniel, testified for the prosecution. On the witness stand, he told the jury that his mother often talked about Robbie's pension and seemed unusually focused on it. According to Nathaniel, she brought it up frequently, mentioning it even on the very night Robbie was killed.
It was a conversation several times. It was almost, we had a conversation about it daily, and I got frustrated several times, and I was like, Mom, there are procedures we have to go through to get to that point.
Perhaps the most intriguing part of Nathaniel's testimony involved a note he found hidden inside one of the sympathy cards collected at Robbie's funeral. While sorting through the cards, a small slip of paper fell out of the one sent by his Aunt Amanda and her fiancé, Larry. The message was brief but unsettling. "We need to talk." It was signed simply, Larry. Amanda later stated she had no memory of the note and was unaware that anything had been inserted into their condolence card.
Can you read that out loud to the jury?
We need to talk. There's a phone number, and it says Larry.
Can you read the phone number?
812-589-5238. Larry.
This note is exactly how you remember it the night that you found it.
Correct.
The note hidden in the sympathy card was one of 2 handwritten messages that prosecutors introduced as evidence of a possible conspiracy after Robbie's death. The second was a letter confirmed by a handwriting expert to be from Larry Richmond Sr., addressed to Barbie and passed to Becky while she was in custody. In the letter, Larry reassured her that the case against her was weak and expressed confidence she wouldn't face trial, so long as she kept quiet. He also urged her not to accept any plea deal. Ironically, not long after that letter surfaced, one of Larry's fellow inmates at the county jail came forward, claiming Larry had confessed to the killing. According to this inmate, Larry admitted he was having an affair with Robbie's wife and had hidden near the home before ambushing and fatally shooting the firefighter. However, this alleged jailhouse confession was deemed inadmissible during Becky's trial. During cross-examination, Becky's defense team pressed a lead detective on the case, highlighting the absence of direct evidence linking Becky to the crime. Though the detective admitted they had found no communications explicitly discussing the murder between Becky and Larry Sr., he maintained his belief that Becky was not telling the truth.
I feel strong about the case, but I have doubts. I mean,
Well, no,
I can't be on the phone conversation with him that night. The deleted phone.
You have. Let's sort of get this out in the open.
Yeah, absolutely.
There was a phone conversation that you asked Becky about at some point, correct?
Correct.
And you allege it's with Larry Richmond Sr., right?
It is, yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
You have no idea what they talked about, do you?
No.
And you know who initiated that call, don't you?
He did.
Who?
Larry Richmond Sr.
He did. In fact, in your investigation, you don't have any evidence that Becky Durr ever initiated a phone conversation of any kind with Larry Richmond Sr., correct?
Correct.
In fact, this idea that is floated that these two were lovers, you don't have any communication between the two of them that would suggest that, do you?
Correct.
So if there's been a representation that there's going to be proof beyond a reasonable doubt that Becky Durr and Larry Richmond Sr. were lovers, that evidence doesn't exist, does it?
Correct. But that's where, may I speak?
Yes.
May I speak, sir? Okay, thank you. When we talked about doubt, that's what, because we can't get content from a phone conversation.
Right.
So I have to take her. Now, looking at everything that has come in, I don't believe her answer. That's where I felt strong. I feel strong about the case, but my doubt is I can't listen to the phone conversation. People can delete text messages between the two.
Right.
And we can't prove but they can discard them before we collect the phone. That happens all the time.
It was Larry Richmond Jr. who ultimately took the stand to connect the final pieces of the puzzle. He testified to the jury about giving the stolen Taurus Judge revolver to his father just days before the murder. Larry Jr. also recounted the one brief encounter he had witnessed between Becky Durr and his father. According to him, Becky met Larry Sr. in their vehicle, where they exchanged a few words and shared a kiss before parting ways.
My father was in the driver's seat, she was in the passenger seat, and I was in the back seat.
And did they have a conversation?
I couldn't recall, I was on my phone.
But you weren't. If they did, you weren't listening to them.
Yeah, I wasn't listening.
And what happened? Did she exit the vehicle?
Yes.
And did anything happen before she got out of the car?
They kissed.
They kissed?
The evidence strongly indicated that Larry Richmond Sr. was the gunman. Cell phone location data from his device placed him in the vicinity of the Oakley Street home before and after the shooting. Investigators recovered over 42,000 files from Larry's iPhone, including 15 location pings within a 67-meter radius of Robbie's residence. The data also showed Larry driving away from the scene after the murder. Notably, his phone was powered off between 6:52 p.m. and 7:14 p.m., the exact time Robbie was shot. At 7:14, Larry's device was tracked to a gas station just around the corner from the house, where he was found accessing a police scanner app. The call he made to Becky was also quickly deleted. Elizabeth Doer did not testify at trial. After roughly 4 hours of deliberation, the 12-member jury returned a verdict on both charges: murder and conspiracy to commit murder.
We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of count 1 as charged in the information signed and dated this date. Verdict, count 2. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of count 2 as charged in the information signed and dated this date. Does either side wish to have the verdict or the jury polled? State? No. Spence? I do not.
Together when you need them. Finally, justice has been served. Dad can finally rest. I'm sorry, but he can finally sleep and finally be put to rest. And the people that are finally being held accountable for what they've done.
At Becky's sentencing hearing, 2 of her sons spoke, though only one did so in her favor. Nathaniel expressed his deep sorrow over the pain her actions had caused the family, stating how her choices had led to her being lost to them forever. When it was Becky's turn, she once again maintained her innocence. Following her statement, her attorney delivered a lengthy speech emphasizing what he believed to be the unfairness of the verdict. They made it clear that they planned to pursue an appeal.
Regardless what the verdict says, I am innocent of these crimes. I never asked anyone to harm or murder my husband. My world came crashing down on the night of February 26, 2019. I was in shock, devastated, lost, and I've never really been the same since.
At 52 years old, Elizabeth Doer was sentenced to 60 years in prison for murder, along with an additional 30 years for conspiracy, with both sentences to be served consecutively. For Robbie's daughter Lindsay, the extended Doer family, and Robbie's many colleagues in the firefighting community, it was the outcome they had hoped for. Still, it was a bittersweet resolution, as nothing could ever bring back the father, grandfather, and dear friend they had lost.
Now Robbie has completed his task. His duties are done. He has given his best. For our brother and friend, his last line, he is going home.
Elizabeth Doer's sentencing took place in mid-June 2024, and her legal team is preparing to mount a strong challenge to the conviction. Meanwhile, as of the time of publication, Larry Richmond Sr.'s trial is scheduled for August 2024.